Hey guys, Steven here, Fanatic Perspective, John Tran. We got episode 5, episode 6 recap of The Last Dance. Tran, I'm so excited to talk with you. These last two episodes were loaded, my friend. Welcome.
I mean, yeah, I can't believe they're hour-long episodes because you blink and it seems like it's over, and it's so much information that I forgot about. These what 30 years ago that they filmed all this, but it was great. The series just keeps getting better and better in my eyes.
Yeah, these two are my favorite because we start getting in nuts and bolts, and a lot of the stuff for those of us who are hoops fans, hoops historians, or you are old enough that you lived through a lot of this. Some of this is a refresher. Some of it is a blast in the past. Some of it is a lot of it for a lot of fans,
Brand new.
like brand new learning experience. But it's also like getting to the meat and the real good stuff of the good, the bad, and the incredible of Michael Jordan. The Bulls in terms of the inner workings of where guys had to find their roles. The juxtaposition of the early Bulls titles teams versus them just that last dance crew, right? So we're getting all of that, and then we're getting a lot of controversial players involved and people involved in this series who are a part of the story, a part of the journey. So I do want to start with an individual who it just got 2020 off to a horrible start. The passing of Kobe Bryant. We finally get his take on things. As for those who don't remember, very very quickly, Kobe Bryant, 1998, was in his second season. Was a sixth man on the Los Angeles Lakers, a Los Angeles Lakers team that had 4 All-Stars that year: Shaquille O'Neal, Kobe Bryant, Eddie Jones, Nick Van Exel. And they won 61 games that year under Del Harris. That was before Phil, and made it to the Western Conference Finals. So the Lakers were an amazing team in that 97-98 season. But Kobe Bryant's voted an All-Star starter at the age of 19, and having to deal with this, right? And he is a fan. He's a super fan, and we get to see Kobe post retirement, Kobe, or and we also get to see Kobe in real time. And from that whole piece, Jordan talking shit about him, the whole thing, what resonated with you just from those clips there?
Just that is that he knew that Kobe looked up to him so much, and he's still in the locker room. He goes, "You know that boy's gonna try to play one-on-one with me, right? I'm gonna shut that shit down." him talking back and forth about this 19-year-old kid who's probably starstruck just to meet him, and Kobe didn't play terrible that game, but and then just hearing how they both feel about each other after the fact. you know,
Absolutely.
Kobe saying, he without Jordan, I don't win my fifth. I don't win five at all. He says, he's the one who set the table for me, gave me that model to look up to, and he was always there. He even told me, "Hey, if you need anything, give me a call," and he was always there to help me on any little specific aspects of my game. I specifically remember back in the day him copying him by putting on 15 pounds of muscle in the off season just off his workout regimen. So just things like that you got to see, and that's one of the things that I really enjoy about this is that it shows the impact that Michael has had on the NBA at a grand scale. So some of the people that the millennials think is the greatest player of all time, they model their game after the guys that I feel is probably the greatest winner and greatest player in the NBA history.
Great points. My cousin Dylan and my best friend Diggs, KD, they would fit that profile. Like, to them, Kobe is their guy, right? And rightfully so. And many
Oh yeah.
people, as you saw him impact the world. And one of the things that's been cool is listening to Kobe fans say, hey, we understand that the genesis of Kobe, the genesis of the Black Mamba lies with Michael Jordan. And that's why we're excited to view this from that lens. And to see Kobe, who rarely humbles himself to the point of giving somebody else that much credit, because Kobe knows how hard he worked and the time that he put in to be as great and as dominant a player as he was for 20 years. But for Kobe to say everything I am as a basketball player is from him and get emotional about it, like it was a very, very genuine statement, and a relationship between the two that grew and lasted, like you stated. They played each other during that season, and the documentary really didn't touch too much on this, but they played each other. It was in the United Center, and it was a great duel. Kobe got a lot of minutes that night, and going back and forth. I believe the Bulls ended up winning, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe the Lakers won. I don't remember who won that game, but it turned into a little bit of a duel. And I remember throughout Kobe asking Michael about how he gets to his spots to do his fadeaway, and where he utilizes that discernment on what angles and how he's going to make that decision to shoot and what type of shots to take. And he was like, I love the answers that Michael gave me, because he gave me an analytical breakdown, and that's how I process things. And I think that's when he even more so learned, all right, went from being in awe of this person to, this is my mentor. This is the person I'm going to learn from and help me take it to the next level. You see this over time with Kobe's career. He wins all his championships in the triangle under Phil Jackson, the exact same way Michael did, right? And from those same spots that he talks about. And so emulating him in a myriad of ways. We'll touch on other ways that players like Kobe and LeBron and other guys have emulated Jordan off the court from a business standpoint later on. But I'm really happy we got to experience just seeing that bit. I think it meant a lot to many of us as sports fans. So that was like real time in terms of the Last Dance, right? In the '98 season, Bulls have now found their stride. They're trying to get as best record as possible so they can start to jockey for seeding for the playoffs. But then we go back to '92, second championship against the Portland Trailblazers, and this is my next question for you. So Jordan says one of his motivations going into that, and you could tell right away he's a guy that would find things to give him that extra edge or that extra advantage or whatever he needed, and it was Clyde Drexler. And so again, educational experience. Clyde Drexler was a phenomenal Hall of Fame basketball player, was probably the second best two guard in the league at that time. And Clyde had already been to the finals, guys. He had already led Portland to the finals in 1990, the Terry Porter, Kevin Duckworth, Clyde Drexler crew. They were very, very good, right? They lost to the Pistons, but they had already won the West. So Clyde already knew how to win the West and get to the finals. Clyde was very, very good. Michael says what? I don't like the fact that they're comparing him to him. And what happened, Tran?
He set an NBA Finals record the first game. I think first the night before he told Magic, he goes, he's going to get worked. and that's exactly what happened. I think they won by 20-ish points, 20-plus points. And they just went on to a pretty easy six-game series for him. Mm-hmm. And he just put all those question marks aside that he should be compared to Jordan. He just put him aside. He looked at him in the rear view.
Jordan told him there's levels to this. And one of the things I want you to kind of go into, because I know when we were talking just as friends before this, the mental aspect of it, that mental edge.
I think this whole series has a subtle theme behind it, and that's the mental aspect of prepping for a game or anything or prepping for playing a sport or anything like that. And Michael was just superior to everyone. It all started with them talking about him getting over the hump of actually him getting over the younger brother hump where he didn't make the high school basketball team. And a lot of kids would have just, hey, that's it, I'm done. But no, he grinded, he worked, he became the best player that next year, got into North Carolina, saw that saw that, hey, yeah, I'm going against James Worthy, who is a Hall of Famer. 2 weeks, picked his brain a little bit, prepared better than him, and by that time he was the best player on that team. Then it goes into his NBA career where he couldn't get past the Pistons. The Pistons had that mental advantage over him, and it wasn't really the mental advantage over him. I think he was already set in stone on his thought processes. I think it was just him instilling that preparation or that mental strength to his team. And once they had that, I think they illustrated that perfectly with them fouling Scottie. And once they saw that Scottie wasn't shaken by that, it was over for them. So it goes deep into the mental aspect of everything for this show.
Totally agree. I mean, when you look at that edge that he gets, that psycho-like manner of, not only do I want to be the best, but I have to leave no doubt. Right? I must destroy this person, because we later saw this with Barkley in the Suns finals when Barkley won MVP. Jordan's disrespected. How dare you? And I know we're jumping episodes, but you know, you saw that with Karl Malone later, which I'm sure they'll get to. Karl Malone wins league MVP. I must eviscerate. I have to leave no doubt. Anytime somebody says there's another guy around here, and just the mentality of amongst that, you don't think that Clyde Drexler thought he was a great player? You don't think that Clyde Drexler was going to that series thinking, this is my chance to prove I'm better than Michael Jordan? But then when Michael Jordan brings it out on the court, it affects the opposition, because he's also one of the most intimidating players. Some of these guys would fall over themselves. We saw with Karl Malone in the finals, right? Like Karl Malone's at certain moments where he's having an amazing game, but then in that moment, Jordan's going to come and take the ball from him or do something.
Yeah, which he for that one play, you're talking about the play that actually won the first championship, where he stripped it from him.
Oh, I'm talking about the last championship against Karl Malone. He takes the ball from Malone. That's when he crossed up Byron Russell and hit the jumper. But
to your point is that he not only wants to, he doesn't want to embarrass them per se, but he wants to leave no doubt. And one of the things that Charles Barkley said was, "Hey, I have never thought that I wasn't the best player on the court. He made me feel that way." So and I think that was probably an internal goal for him, is just to leave no doubt that he is the best player.
So they go on to win. They now win their second championship in a row. He's starting to separate himself, right? Different levels.
Because what was the stat that they threw out? How many teams to that point had gone back to back? Was it only 3? The Pistons, Lakers, and
I don't
Celtics.
Recall.
It was very rarefied air just for repeating,
right?
Let alone winning a three-peat.
If somebody knows that exact stat, please put that in the comments. So a few months later, we have the summer, Barcelona Olympics. In real quick synopsis, hey, we're tired of losing. We had a rough time in '88. And, God bless David Robinson and those guys and those college kids, but they got worked in '88. All right, '92, we need to have, and '90 as well, when Croatia won the, I think it was the World Basketball Championship, if I'm not mistaken. So, 1992 rolls around. We need to put our best guys out there, and the Dream Team concept comes about. A lot of controversy around one Isaiah Thomas, who on the court accolades probably should have been the third or fourth player asked to be on the team, especially at that time. Again, like I said in our last episode recap, Isaiah was the first little man to be the catalyst for a championship team in NBA history at that time, and was still an elite player in the league. Only a couple years removed from being not just a champion, but an NBA's final, back-to-back champion, right? So they have the politics come into play. And Jordan, for years, has gotten the brunt of it, right? People say, hey, Jordan. But there's a lot more to this, in my opinion. Number one, Isaiah had problems with a lot of different players.
Yep.
Wasn't just Jordan. And I know Isaiah and Magic had this, they were like brothers at one time, and then Magic allegedly, when he tested HIV positive, Isaiah was talking behind his back about it or saying rumors, woo woo. There's stuff out there about that. Isaiah said some really, really disparaging things about Larry Bird in the 80s when he said, hey, if he was black, he'd just be another average player. And knowing how conscious Bird was always about that in his NBA career, not necessarily being a white superstar, but commanding the respect of his black peers. Larry Bird once famously said, if to an opposing team, if y'all decide to put a white guy on me, I'm taking that as a sign of disrespect. I want a brother to cover me. Like, that's the only person that can and that's the type of mentality Larry Bird had. So Isaiah Thomas comes along late 80s and says, he'd just be another player. And this is Larry Bird, who I would make the case was the best player of the 80s. He won 3 straight MVPs in an era where everyone was in their prime. 3 straight MVP, that's dominance, right? And won 3 titles. So for Larry Bird's going to feel some type of way. And then the biggest person that no one ever brings up about this, and then I'll throw it back to you. Chuck Daly was the head coach, his own coach. So I don't know under what stipulations or what the politics was behind.
Which I have a theory about that. The reason why Chuck Daly did not fight about it. My theory is he knew that Isaiah's ankles were worse than what he was portraying. I think he was taking into account that he didn't want a cancer in the locker room because of all those the people he rubbed wrong, honestly. Mm-hmm. And third, I do think that Michael had a big say in the matter. Because you're also leaving out Pippen too. Pippen was a big part of the so you're talking about
Pippen felt some type of way about Isaiah as well.
You're talking about four of the what is it 15 that make the dream
however
team?
Many spots, right?
And those 4 are starters. so if you're talking about bro, I personally think he should have been on it. He definitely had the.
There's
all
no
the
question about
accolades
his resume and his skill level, right?
But are you going to honestly argue against John Stockton too being put on there? John Stockton's a great player.
No, John Stockton's. So this is another thing that I've noticed. People act as though, and they say it's blasphemous that John Stockton was on the team. Number one. And I've heard great arguments. Hey, if it's a dream team, and this is because another part of the dream team was showcasing us being a global game and showcasing our stars to the world. So we also want the most notable. So on that argument alone, Isaiah definitely should have been on there, considering his face. And people overseas really didn't know John Stockton. We actually saw this in the Dream Team documentary when Stockton and his family are walking around and nobody knew who the hell he was, right? But this notion that John Stockton isn't a top 5 point guard of all time and wasn't an incredible NBA point guard and a model point guard is ludicrous.
He's leading historical statistics. 2 of them.
John Stockton is the all-time NBA leader in steals, which that category is not close, by the way.
Yeah.
He's also the all-time leader in assists. And so I've heard this because I heard this on First Take with Max, Stephen A., and Jay Williams. And they were trying to get on Max because I actually agree with Max that, yes, Isaiah is better than John Stockton all time. I have him ranked ahead of John Stockton. They are not far apart, though, okay? I understand Isaiah won 2 championships. John Stockton, career-wise, if we're looking at overall resume, though, did have a longer, in terms of individually, just as fruitful of a career. Now, I'm sure he would trade all those stats for the championships that Isaiah won. But to just say that, well, John Stockton was solely a byproduct of Karl Malone and the pick and roll and Jerry Sloan is so incredibly disrespectful. And it's also one-sided because I could also say that Karl Malone wouldn't be the second all-time leading scorer if he didn't have a point guard like John Stockton. Mm-hmm. It's they go together, okay? And John Stockton defensively, please, people, do some homework. Go watch tape of his and other NBA players have validated this. Gary Payton said the most difficult player he ever faced in his NBA career was John Stockton. John Stockton was a pest defensively, had elite lateral quickness. Just because he wasn't a great run and jump athlete in terms of explosiveness, no. Um, but in terms of side to side, being able to pick up and guard his man and run an offense and be a great shooter, John Stockton fit that mold and set the tone for guys like a Chris Paul in the later generation.
Yeah, and people aren't factoring in the ability of his off the ball screens too, getting his teammates open. He was a smart, heady player too. So
Did
I mean,
so much without the basketball. That's a great point. And you know what a lot of it is? Like people look at him and they see a short white dude and they're just like, he's this. And Isaiah's, good looking, cool brother. And so we're gonna, people are gonna always side with that instead of actually. Now Isaiah did get the best of John Stockton when they played head to head. Again, Isaiah is ahead of John Stockton as a basketball player, but it is not this ridiculous gap. John Stockton actually played until 2003, into his 40s. How was he still a starting point guard in the NBA, leading his team to the playoffs, if he was some, because this narrative has come about, and we're going to talk about this with Dan Marley as well, with a lot of these, people, some of our subscribers have hit us up on Facebook and Twitter. And for those of you who continue to reach out, please do so. I'm enjoying all the conversations. But you guys have said, well, Jordan faced a bunch of white dudes with dad bods. Been hearing a lot of that.
so
And
there was a side by side between Dan Marley and Klay Thompson, and Dan Marley looked looked way better shape than how Klay Thompson looked. And people just, I mean, it's a recency bias. First of all, they don't realize what type of athlete Dan Marley was. He was 6'8", around 225,
somewhere
lean,
around,
muscular, and he was even athletic. I think at one point he was in a dunk contest, was he not? I don't think he won it, but I think he was in a dunk contest.
No, he wasn't. Yeah, he didn't win.
But
he was a very good athlete, great shooter.
people laughing of the fact that a 6'8" guy was thrown on Jordan. I mean, that's what people would do nowadays is put
Dan Marley listed 6'6", 222.
Okay, well, still, I mean,
But still, yeah,
yeah,
prototypical small forward. Klay Thompson's what, 6'7"?
Yeah,
so
he's around the
pretty
same
much
height.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he was athletic and he had all the motor in the world. One game, I think they said 46 minutes.
Yeah, and
So
he was all defensive team both those years. So that when they went to play the Phoenix Suns in the finals, Dan Marley was second team on defense. Like you said, very, very good athlete. Again, you guys are looking at him like he's Tim Toolman Taylor from Home Improvement. And y'all just seeing, these white guys or whatever out here. But Luka, on the other hand, who looked like he smoked a pack of cigarettes when he came in the league and had a little baby fat on him. He can and has no bounce, but can just move all over the court and already come in year two and be a dominant NBA player and today. Yeah. But y'all want to get on these guys back then and then disregard the people that were athletic. We just talked about Isaiah. Kevin Johnson, who was also on that Phoenix Suns team. Kevin Johnson, for those who don't know, had a 45-inch vertical. To put that in context, Derrick Rose coming in the league had a 42-inch vertical. So miss me with all the dad bod and Jordan played against a bunch of plumbers. You sound ignorant when you say that, to be quite frank. I do want to move on, though, to the international aspect of the Dream Team conversation. So they do go over to Barcelona. We know what happened over there, right, in the Olympics. They kill. But it wasn't just to win the gold medal and to reassert USA as the dominant basketball program. It was also to, like we said, promote the game. They already knew that this game was opening up. We started seeing people get drafted into the NBA from overseas. And there was a point you wanted to make just in terms of leading into Toni Kukoc of Croatia.
So the Toni Kukoc thing is, everyone was talking about, hey, this is not an international game, and I know that was David Stern's biggest initiative was to make this a worldwide game. We had started breaking into overseas talent with Vlade Divac, but the big one that actually became a star was Drazen Petrovic. People who don't know him, I think legendary player overseas. I think one game he scored 110 points. He died tragically in a car accident. They hadn't really caught lightning in a bottle like him since then. Jerry Krause comes along and finds this kid, Tony Kukoc. Tony Kukoc is his idea. He's the next big thing. He's going to take Chicago to the next level. After Jordan tiptoes out the door.
Yeah.
They took that as disrespect. So talking about that mental edge that you're talking about with Jordan, he always was prepping. He said, "Hey, everyone, Pippen and I have Kukoc." They shut him down. I don't think he was ready, and they wanted to prove a point that said, "Hey, you shouldn't be paying this guy. You should be paying the people who got you there."
Like Scotty. Yeah.
And they thought that he wasn't ready. Fast forward to the championship game. He brought him to the championship game, and he changed their mind. And going over what he had to go through, going through a civil war, things like that, and his mental toughness. I really am glad that they touched on that, because that kind of got the respect of both Scotty and Jordan. I mean, they had nothing against Tony Kukoc. They had everything to do with Jerry Krause and them not taking care of their own. But he did end up turning into a great NBA player. Probably the first Ginobili-esque player who came off the bench for that team and energized the team. But it
absolutely,
really
it was a huge part of their three-peat.
Yeah, and I think
critical piece.
Without the dream team established, I don't think that the game would be as international as it is today.
I think Dirk Nowitzki said something like that too, in terms of like being inspired. Even if you were kind of playing basketball, then it set the tone. And to your influence, because that carries us over to the business side of things that I want to spend some time talking about. When you see the image of Tony Kukoc, I believe he was either in Croatia or maybe it was Barcelona. I don't know, but I noticed that when he was walking around, he was wearing Jordan gear. And it's just interesting, like already the global reach, right? Because we got introduced to David Falk, and they give us the incredible story of the shoe game, the sneaker game, which is such a massive part of pro basketball and sports, really, right? And the way it was, where it was kind of like Converse, pick a color, pick your star. And then Jordan comes along, and David Falk's like, we want to change the game. We want to do something differently. Jordan's a huge Adidas fan. And, poor Adidas, in the history of time, they've really only ended up with Kanye. So, it's tough. But Nike, which is, out of Oregon, they were more in the track and field. They had kind of that startup vibe, and they launched the incredible Air Jordan campaign. Really pushed along, and I want to touch on this. Dolores Jordan. Wow. Did not know she was one of the driving factors on a business end of making
gangster.
Dolores Jordan's winning some points in this documentary, Tran.
She is. Not only genetically, I mean, she looks like Jordan's sister right now, but secondly, the fact that she definitely, he's a mama's boy. You can tell that, because he's like, I don't like Nike. She goes, you take the meeting. I don't care if you don't listen. You don't disrespect people like that. And he took it. I mean, because of what mama said. So, I mean, without her, the Jordan probably, I don't think that Converse or Adidas would put a marketing campaign together like what Nike did. So
the Air Jordan concept, the freedom to collaborate, the connection, as they said, to the urban culture, which then by default becomes what's cool amongst the youth and American culture. Everybody had to have a pair of Jordans. I'm glad they had different people like Justin Timberlake on to talk about this, because we all have a Jordan story, right, in terms of the sneakers. Um, I'll go first. Back when the 17s came out, I was in 8th grade, and I had to have them, man. I love the design of the shoe. And it wasn't just the shoe. I had to have the box with the bag, with the little mesh bag.
Hmm.
And then I got that was the first time I really, really cared about wardrobe. Like, my mom had gotten me some the Flightposite 2s, and I didn't realize how cool those were at the time. But when the 17s came out, I was like, all right, I think I'm gonna be a sneakerhead now. Like, and it was, for me, it was short lived, because I didn't realize the maintenance that went into caring for your
Yeah.
shoes. And
Yeah.
as a kid, I would like to just, I was always all purpose guy, right? Like, but, and then I was like, whoa, if I wear these, I can't go outside, what I'm saying, or to the playground, like, or constantly cleaning and the maintenance behind it. But it was also just the coolness that came behind it. Like, I had never gotten that much attention at school, from a wardrobe perspective. Like, when I got those 17s, and everyone, like, every single period, I'll never forget that first day after the mall. You know how pressed you are when you buy some new shoes at the mall with your parents, and then you got to wear them out the store. Like, you won't put the shoes you walked in on. You know what I'm talking about. And,
Yes.
like, I was so freaking pressed, bro. Like, I had my wardrobe laid out on the dresser Saturday night for Monday morning to go to school, and I faked and flexed all the way with the freaking mesh bag too, with on my backpack. So it was like those 17s, man. That's my Jordan story. What's yours?
So I have quite a few ones. I mean, we can talk about the
For
one.
the sake of time,
Yeah.
pick one that really
Okay.
resonates with you.
So one that really resonates with me is I would say I'm a sneakerhead, but I'm not a sneakerhead, if you know what I'm saying. I'm not one of those guys like, oh yeah, here's the
Collector's
drop spot. Yeah.
editions. Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
but I always got the new Jordans every single year sequentially. Like, no matter what. I flew out, this was my senior year of high school. We flew out to I flew back down to Texas, and this was the first time that I found out that they had regionally based Jordans, and that to me, my mind was blown. So I had the East Coast versions, and then I got the Central. There's East Coast, there's Central, and then there's also a Chicago specific ones, and then there's also West Coast. And when I found that out, I had to. This was before they had shops all over the internets with this. So
Right.
I tried to find any one of my family to, hey, please pick me up these and send them over to me, because no one would have those up in New York when I lived there. And just finding that out, I was like, dang, man, they really do put a lot of money into these shoes. I had no idea about that.
That quick sidebar, because you brought up something else, the lack of internet presence. So that was also when brothers were walking around with the East Bay catalog all day.
Yeah. Oh
Weren't
yeah.
ever gonna buy shit, but you always had the
The
newest East Bay catalog. You know exactly what I'm talking about,
Yep.
right? So, just going on, and I know this is going to be a long one, but we had so much content here, guys. So, with all the power, Gatorade comes out the Be Like Mike campaign, and Jordan goes from best, most notable athlete in the world to almost a godlike figure. Idolatry starts to set in with and a negative light, I think, from his fame and how it starts to impact him. And then on the flip side of it is also, like, with all this power, with all this notoriety, I hate to quote Uncle Ben in Spider-Man, comes what? Comes great responsibility. And he gets the call from his mother, and they go into the Harvey Gantt versus Jesse Helms Senate race in his home state of North Carolina. And, you know, whether it was lack of information, whether it was him not wanting to make a statement, obviously somehow get, and he said it in jest, but Republicans buy shoes too. And, he said that he funded Harvey Gantt's campaign and supported him, and But I think his mother and those in the, especially in the Black community, understanding the the, the social barriers and social dynamics, I should say, that were going on there, wanted him to do more, wanted him to speak up, wanted him to use that influence to help potentially sway that election. He chose not to do so. Um, I'll start just how I personally feel about it. I think it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't. Because from a bit, Jordan at that time, I think President Obama said it best. He was still trying to find the type of person he is and who he was going to be. And with the gravity and the weight of that, especially being, a Black man, at that time he's under 30, and just so much like, how do you wrestle and deal with all these things off the court? And, um, you know, he says, I don't want it to impact my business. And so, yeah, from a business standpoint, um, because we've also seen how it's affected other individuals who have decided to take on take on those things and try to sway public opinion or provide their own opinion, or um, even be real big social advocates for a particular uh, candidate or issue out there. So I think it is very, very nuanced. Um, I can see both sides of it, to be honest with you, because at that time, Jordan's trying to ride that wave and secure the bag. But at the same token, that's also what will separate him off the court. And I think they were wrong about saying, oh, he'll be forgotten or whatever. I think his legacy is found beyond that, no matter what happens. But I do think that people will always hold Muhammad Ali in a different light, because what Muhammad Ali was willing to sacrifice and what Michael Jordan was not willing to sacrifice, right? And Muhammad Ali was willing to let it all go and be a bad guy at that time for something where the history books now remember him as a civil rights proponent for change and somebody that made this world a better place, not just with his accolades and his competitiveness in the ring, but also what he did outside of it. Michael Jordan will never get that type of acclaim. So just wanted to get your thoughts on it. That's kind of how I felt about the situation.
Well, I know you might be shocked about this, but I don't know if I could put myself in his shoes. but I actually really didn't like the comparison between Muhammad Ali and him. Muhammad Ali's was at way grander scale than what he was dealing with. So he was dealing with the draft and him having to go in and him getting crap for having to change his name, things like that. Michael Jordan just
dealing with the Nation of Islam.
He just didn't publicly support someone. In the day of age, I mean, the color barrier had been broken for a while in the NBA. So at this point, I think he was saying, hey, let's get money now. Make sure that the bag man comes, as you like to so eloquently put it. So I think he was looking at it from a strictly business perspective. He wasn't, in a way, it's very selfish, but how many people would honestly do the same thing if they said, hey, this is going to affect your business by this much. If you have those numbers in front of your face, because I'm pretty sure someone was talking to him from Nike or his endorsements were talking to him about that. Is it selling out? Yes, in a way it is, but I mean, there's very few people that wouldn't do the same thing.
And I think it also just it speaks to the time. I do think the ask of him versus what Muhammad Ali decided to take on, you're right, was a completely different scale. But one could also argue, I'm asking a lot less of you in that situation. And I don't think it's even being political or whatever. Like there's Republican candidates that you can support, and there's Republican candidates that, do have those old, good old boy racial aspect behind them, and so in the case of Jesse Helms, it was the latter, right? And so it's like, hey, this person is destructive within our community in terms of withholding progress. When you hear about the stories about him not even wanting to vote for Martin Luther King Day, like easy ones that anybody, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, you should be able to check that box correctly in terms of current social norms. I think it's just very, very interesting that's the path it went down, because that's another way he will be compared to even a LeBron James. I don't remember Kobe Bryant necessarily having to go through. Kobe's off the court stuff was very, very different, but LeBron has been outspoken and done those type of things within the community, has been an advocate, especially for African American men, and trying to uplift ourselves, uplift the community, and say, hey, be more than an athlete, and all those types of things. Not that you're out here being a civil rights activist or anything like that, but I also think there's a point on the other side of, hey, if you're going to speak up on issues, please be informed.
Mm-hmm.
Please be informed. Don't just speak up because somebody told you to speak up or to support somebody. And I do think there's validity to that, because once I put my reputation and for down for you, whatever the cause is, I am putting a lot at risk. So a lot to consider there, and I hope they touch on some other things if they come up throughout the rest of the documentary. I don't ever want to shy away from social conversations or racial conversations. I feel like I think the more you talk about it, and you're willing to have a conversation without being emotional and looking at it from rational points of view and from how different people are looking at it, it's a nuanced conversation, just like anything else that we deal with during this current time. But I do think that leads us here, going to episode 6. The next thing I'm gonna queue up, Tran, for us is the political ramifications leading into the scrutiny of the media, because we now get introduced to the New York Knicks, right? And how great they were. Patrick Ewing, John Starks, Anthony Mason, Charles Oakley, who was a former teammate of Jordan's, and now they're the new bullies on the block. They want to have that Detroit Pistons-like intensity, and Jordan's starting to burn out in that third season, or they're going for the three-peat, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's the Eastern Conference Finals. Jordan's starting to burn out a little bit. Hits up at Atlantic City with his father, James, and the media scrutiny that the backlash he gets off of that, doesn't play well. And I think that was like his first dose of like, oh, they can turn against me. What were your thoughts just on that transition there from being the golden boy to now scrutinized by the media? Oh, and by the way, this guy's partying and is gambling, and now he has to address those type of things.
So I think everyone, he had been the media's darling, for the longest time. And the thing with the media is they get paid on people viewing their content. So what's going to have more views or more draw more attention than a vice of the media's darling? So some negative content will get them so much publicity. So that was his first time actually dealing with it. So and the stresses of work and trying to be this amazing athlete, it takes a toll on your body. It takes a toll on your body, and especially your mind. So you just don't want to put up with that. When you're on your own time, you want to be on your own time. And they illustrated that great in the documentary about him in his hotel room, and him just laying down, just relaxing, smoking a cigar, just saying, this is the only time I'm happy right now. And then it shows him get up, go down the elevator, and the first thing he sees, hundreds of people. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
fans too. Yeah.
It could take down a lot of people with that type of pressure that he has to portray and be someone that, I mean, I'm not going to say it's someone that he's not, but a watered down version of himself.
We saw 2 images of this too, and that's why I love the way they're doing this. So we see again 93 where he's in God mode, and it's burning him out, and it's like how do I deal with this, learning about it real time, dealing with political issues, dealing with shoe companies, all this type of stuff. And then 98, where it's like we're now the season rock band on tour doing our last hurrah. And they show the beautiful scene of the Georgia Dome when they go to play the Atlanta Hawks. And again, there's nobody like this in the regular season, guys, where, because we're talking about the 98 Bulls now, where they're going to play a regular season basketball game and there's 62,000 people there and they're like, we could have sold more tickets, and they're playing in a freaking, it looked like a Final Four game, right? Like that's the type of setup they had when these big colleges play each other in the NCAA tournament. And they have the backdrop of Outkast there. What was it, Rosa Parks?
Rosa Parks, yep.
Yeah, Rosa Parks is playing, and it's just like, it's perfect. It's late 90s. It was, I think it captured that it wasn't, you weren't just going to go see a game. Like, I remember the first time I went to go see LeBron, it was a big deal. Like, I was going to go see LeBron in person. It was when Gilbert Arenas and Antawn Jamison and Larry Hughes were doing their thing on the Wizards, and Bron was like trying to figure out, you know, how to get, they had a little rivalry going on with Cleveland, and Bron was trying to figure out how to get past those guys. I went to a game. Gilbert actually had 45 in that game. Gilbert was cold. Nice. Agent Zero. Hibachi, he went off that night. But I remember wanting to see how big LeBron was, and just being in awe of him. And I feel like a lot of basketball fans were in awe of Bron, you know, during that time. And even now, like, you know, it's a bucket list. Go check that off. The Bulls was a different energy though, guys. And when you see it back then, it's like going to go see Michael Jackson in concert. When you see the fans 3-4 hours after the game's over at the hotel in the garage, and people are just camped out. This is our own, like, the Bulls are in town. It's Bulls mania, right? I don't know if we'll see that again in our lifetime, Trey.
No, we won't. Just the perfect portrayal was them selling the tickets, the season tickets for the last season. This is before the internet, before people could buy that online. They sold out in a matter of hours. Of course, it took hours because there was only a certain amount of bandwidth that they had to actually sell this. If it was nowadays, it'd probably be within 10 minutes that they'd sell out the season ticket packages. So I mean, it's just amazing to see that in perspective of the times versus the times that we're at now, and how would they translate that way.
So going back to 93, they do figure out how to get past the Knicks. Very, very competitive series. The Knicks were a team that year. I would argue maybe they go off, if they win, maybe they beat Phoenix. I don't know. Phoenix did have the best record in the league that year. Charles Barkley was MVP, but you know, Pat Riley, they show him, you know, in a cabana somewhere in Miami with the white beard, just looking crisp. Wanted to give a shout out to him. And that whole situation just shows the greatness of Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen. Scottie Pippen was a dog in that series as well, and how they had now learned mentally how to overcome stuff. Hey, we were down in a series. We were down with 2-0, right? And no panic. We'll figure this out. They kind of go the opposite way in the Phoenix series, where they're up and, you know, they got to figure stuff out. They start losing some games in Chicago. Oh, it's unheard of. We're starting to get beat on our home floor. No panic. But they're led by their leader, Michael Jordan. And the thing about Jordan, he takes the MVP. I mentioned it earlier with Barkley winning the MVP. He takes it personally. And Jordan in that finals was incredible. He set the tone from a standpoint of, he had a 55-point game. And that game is not really talked about on the same tier as the 63-point game in triple overtime against the Celtics. Like, a 55-point game in the finals under all the circumstances, like you said, I mean, just an amazing performance. And you know, your quick thoughts on that 93 finals.
It's just one of the things that just keeps on I keep on seeing people post about is, interesting, John Paxson hits the game winner. like come on now. I mean, like even John Paxson said, I didn't know I was going to get the ball. I wasn't supposed to get the ball, but I was ready. And, I was ready because Michael and Phil had us ready. Like at every single point in the game, you have to be ready because he could be bailing out. A lot of people are going to be focused a lot on Michael and Scotty, so we got to do our job and make sure we're ready.
Thank you for bringing up John Paxson. You queued that up for me perfectly. So people talk about basketball is a team sport. Everybody has to be willing to contribute. Now, if we're comparing players, so that I say that to say it should never be a knock. I don't like when people knock LeBron because LeBron passed the ball to somebody that was wide open and they missed or made it or whatever, and it was the correct basketball play, what have you. Now, LeBron has shown a tendency, and Bron fans are going to come at me, I don't really care. He has shown a tendency to stray away from that big moment or taking that big shot when those easy opportunities weren't necessarily available to him. Another reason why LeBron consistently gets in those situations, though, is because he is so ball dominant and he's always comprised a system, right, which is around him being the facilitator, the alpha, the omega, everything. So defenses very easily collapse on LeBron at the end of games because the ball movement's not there. And even when he was with Miami, all of LeBron's championships, it ended up turning into his turn, my turn anyway, whether it was him and D Wade or him and Kyrie. When Kyrie made that shot, it was a his turn, my turn thing. And they went and they allowed Kyrie to go ISO off that right side where he was money all year, and he made the shot to win in Game 7. The difference, though, with the Bulls is when they were running a triangle offensive system where guys, even though, yes, the last fourth quarter games, they would put the ball in Michael's hands and allow him to be more ball dominant, they still could rely on their system because everyone was so used to touching the basketball. If you notice on that sequence, John Paxson, when he makes that shot, 4 different Bulls touched the basketball before John Paxson hit that shot. And the person that passed it to him was not Michael Jordan. It was Horace Grant, right? Horace Grant actually got the ball on the low block. I don't remember if they collapsed or not, but John Paxson's wide open because the ball's moving. It actually kicked up to Scotty. Scotty forwards it to Horace Grant. Horace Grant then passes to John Paxson. All meanwhile, while there's 2 dudes on the Phoenix Suns right after Michael Jordan because they're assuming he's going to be ball dominant. But when you're running a system as Phil installed, that allows people to still play within themselves and be effective. And so John Paxson is used to getting that shot because their offense is designed by that in terms of natural flow. People need to understand the difference between running an actual offensive system, whatever you do, and somebody being ball dominant, i.e. a James Harden. If I pull James Harden off of the Houston Rockets, they're going to struggle, right? Unless you just decide to put Russell Westbrook right there to allow him to do the same thing because they're so reliant not just on his scoring, but his decision-making. Every decision is made by James Harden. In the triangle makes the decision based upon the defense on where the ball goes. And that's what you saw play out at the end of Game 6 where Horace Grant's like, oh, ball's moving. Oh, he's wide open. Boom. It was a muscle memory that took over in that moment.
If you think that it's just a one-off situation, no, it happens later on with Steve Kerr doing the same thing. Spoiler alert, sorry. So one thing I wanted to go just a transition thought. You did bring up Horace Grant. Do you think it was Horace Grant that leaked all that information from that book?
Sam Smith, I do think he disclosed some information. I do agree with B.J. Armstrong though that it couldn't have just been Horace.
Yeah.
Okay. Horace does deserve some flack for that. I can definitely see where I do see Jordan's point where, hey, Horace was kind of the third banana because Dennis was a part of this too later on the second time. Remember we talked about last episode, Dennis wanting some of that attention, wanting some of that love because it's the Michael and Scotty show. And it's like, well, I want to be relied upon too. There's no doubt in my mind that Horace Grant probably felt the same way. Horace Grant was an all-star level player. He was no scrub whatsoever and was their key front court guy when battling against the big monsters down there, right? So I'm sure he felt some type of way. Egos is another thing. You talked about the mental side of things being an underlying storyline. Well, egos is an underlying storyline.
Ego goes into that, yeah.
Yeah, you have coaches here wanting credit. You have the GM wanting credit. You have Scottie Pippen wanting more respect. So such a big part of sports in general is just people understanding their roles and accepting their role.
Especially when you're dealing with it as a business model, as opposed to just, hey, we're a pickup league, just a little rec league type of.
Well, the last thing I want to touch on before we tie off here, because I know we've been rapping, but this is fun, man.
I mean, we said that this was one of our favorite episodes. We're gonna start talking about it. So
yeah. So going off the media scrutiny, Michael decides to shut down the media, and there's a relationship that had already been there with him and Ahmad Rashad, but then it blossoms. By the way, Ahmad Rashad looks amazing right now. He's 70 years old. Dude looks like he's 45. It's incredible. As somebody said, black don't crack unless it's on crack. So Ahmad, that's not my line. I got that from somebody on Twitter. But Ahmad, is Michael's. I think it was during the '93 finals. Michael's like, I want to talk, out of nowhere, right? Like he's been sending his dad out there, kind of how LeBron sometimes sends Maverick Carter out there, whoever, to go do his bidding, to Dave McMenamin. Michael sends his father out there, but then he says, Ahmad, I want to talk. And he does the infamous sunglasses interview. My wife, this was arguably my wife's favorite part, was Michael sitting there talking in third person. It's just like full-on God mode Michael, in the shades, and it's awesome. But we later on see their relationship grow to a point where I don't know if anyone in the media had the level of access that Ahmad Rashad had to Michael Jordan. I don't know if there's any comparison other than you had brought up one other one in terms of a.
Doesn't count though. It's sibling, Cheryl Miller and Reggie Miller, but
yeah,
just the fact of him hanging out at his house, getting into his car, sitting in traffic. They showed it
like
all.
A fog. It's raining. Yes. It's terrible Chicago weather.
Pulling into the players' parking lot. It's just if that happened nowadays, people would be all over them.
Ahmad is on the NBC broadcast, and this is a playoff game against the Nets. Like, I would be irate if I knew that was going on today. I'd be irate if I was a Nets fan, right? Like, now I know nobody at the time did anyone really care about Kerry Kittles and those guys. No disrespect, but like, sorry.
No disrespect, but a lot of disrespect.
But it's just like, what is this? I thought we're supposed to be objective here. There's the professional, but Ahmad gets all access, and again, he's part of the NBC broadcasting team, and it's just like he's traveling to the game with Jordan, and it's just stuff you'll never see. Tony Romo, maybe we will now that Brady's in Tampa Bay and he's open book, but and I feel like Brady's in that mode right now where Jordan was in '98, where he's just he wants to be celebrated, but in the right way, where he's opening himself up to a lot of this stuff and taking on a lot more than he ever did in New England. And I'm seeing that a lot from him. But that would be the equivalent of somebody like a Tony Romo or any of the sideline or people, that are working for whether it's Fox or CBS, just riding to the game with them and then going to do a broadcast. Like, people would, like you said, freak out on social media.
Tony Saragusa eating an all-you-can-eat buffet with J.J. Watt before the game.
And they just keep on going, right? Like,
yeah, I know.
Like, it's just incredible Ahmad stuff. But guys, these last two episodes, I know we touched on a lot.
I think we need to touch quickly on the gambling. Just real quick. I mean,
oh yeah, how do we forget the game?
Yeah,
you're so good at this every week. Because there's so much.
There's so much. It's 2 hours of material crammed into one. I mean, we mentioned that, but
this brother Slim Buller, Slim Buller, what a name. He has a Jerry curl. He's a golf hustler, and obviously him and Michael have some gambling going on, and then obviously the Knicks, the Atlantic City during the series, the playful stuff, him and the staff, and we fall in love with some of those CSC people and security they're playing quarters. And where
Which
do
kind of
you
humanized
fall?
him right there, by
I
the way,
agree.
which
I
was
agree.
awesome. Yeah.
I agree. And he came back and he's like, I got some more quarters. Like,
Yeah,
you guys will play.
he goes, we're doing it again,
Yeah.
and just I know Will Purdue put it in the fact that he goes, no, he doesn't have a gambling problem, he has a competitive problem, because he said they would gamble for thousands and thousands of dollars, poker, and then he'd see us playing blackjack for $1 a hand, and he would want in on that game too, just because he wants to take I want your dollar right there in my pocket, type of thing. So. I agree with that because it didn't get out of control, kind of like the Charles Barkley story of him losing 10-ish millions, $10 million. But the the sunglass interview, he definitely had all the all the familiarities of a degenerate gambler. Him saying, "I can stop whenever I want," type of thing. But
Well,
yeah,
even modern day now, right? Like he's like, well, I didn't do anything. Like he's so defensive about it now. I'm happy
and he
that they
should.
addressed it to the
Yeah,
magnitude they did, but
I mean, he should be like, if you and I go and gamble 100, 200, or even $1,000, is anyone else going to be like, oh, he's got a gambling problem? No, this guy has a lot of money, and they were talking about, he lost $10,000 overnight. 10,000. Someone compared it, $10,000 to him is $10 to us, type
yeah.
of thing. So
Yeah, with David Aldridge had that.
yeah, it's all subjective, and but once again, the media adds a lot of pressure on them, which brings me to the question to ask you is like, if this happened in today's terms, how do you think he would have held up mentally with all the media and
I
everyone
think
having a camera, everyone has a voice with Twitter or things like that? How do you think he would hold up? Do you think he'd still be the assassin that he is now?
I think he fares very similar to what we saw with Kobe Bryant, where where he would be a lot more of a villain in some ways. I still think he would be the same player on the court, but this is the question that people need to be asking, not does his athleticism hold up today? It does. He still has the highest recorded vertical leap in NBA history, more than Zion, more than D Rose, LeBron, everybody. The record is still Michael Jordan. Not if he would have developed a 3-point shot. Michael Jordan barely had a mid-range shot, as Chris Broussard pointed out, coming into the NBA, and he finished as arguably the greatest mid-range shooter ever. So the work ethic, the athleticism, the form was there for him to develop. The question we have to ask ourselves with Jordan is the social media and the media aspect alone. We saw him struggling with that then.
Mm-hmm.
It's 100 times worse now, maybe 1,000 times worse, right? There's no even way to measure that. So I do think it would, because not just the gambling stuff, but even women, right? The advent of TMZ. Jordan did have some infidelity going on. I'm sure they're not going to touch on any of that stuff. And there was even a paternity test issue in 1991 that he was dealing with. Several things that were going on that didn't make it to public light beyond a tabloid, right? So now it would be all over Twitter. It'd be on ESPN. It'd be TMZ would be front running with it, right? So it would be like how Kobe had to deal with things, and I think he would be perceived a lot of that. Where Kobe, was always an assassin on the court, always had, the Jordan now Mamba mentality, but at times you saw Kobe break a little bit. Even when, how many times did Kobe have to get traded out of LA and would go on ESPN and say, I want to go play for the Bulls, or that happened, right? And he struggled a lot with that, to the point where he had to even harden himself more before Kobe ended up letting us back in after he retired.
Yeah.
Right. That was when he kind of started opening, and then remodeled himself with his work in the arts and being a content creator and then ultimately through women's activities with his daughter and Gigi and so forth.
Mhm.
But Jordan, I think he would have struggled with that. I mean, that's where I do give LeBron, like we've seen LeBron melt down, we've seen LeBron build himself back up, we've seen LeBron then have this rocky road with the media. Jordan would have been no different. I think the only difference is I don't think it would have ever led to Jordan necessarily melting down on the court. However, those who want to argue against could also say that's why the dude retired twice, right? Um, Also, just the pressures, whatever.
I disagree
Some
with that.
people say
I
that.
don't think that he would. I don't think that he would melt down on the court. I think he would use that as motivation from what we've spoken about. He's
I
like,
agree with
all right,
you.
I'm going to shut you guys up. All right, you're going to talk about that like that? I'm going to shut you guys up.
I
But
agree
that's
with you
just my
because
thought
we
process.
never saw him melt down on the court. He may have had an off. Some people are bringing up one playoff game where he went 3 for 18, even though he was still the leading scorer in the entire series on both teams, and they won the series. But yeah, he would have off games,
Mhm.
or he may struggle with trying to figure out what I'm sure you'll see it in the Sonic series. Like he struggled a little bit with what Gary Payton was doing with him for a little bit. Like he was actually giving Jordan problems, but it never progressed over an entire 6 or 7 game series. Jordan always cracked the code. We've seen times where players like Kevin Durant or LeBron weren't able to crack the code and they were eliminated and then had to go and rebuild themselves. So, very, very interesting conversation, and one that I would like to continue on social media for you guys out there. So I know this was a real long episode. Tran, anything else we need to touch on before we go into next week?
Nothing much. I'm excited to hear about
Me too.
the infamous Steve Kerr fight. Which, by the way, yes, little background is that Steve Kerr is my favorite player outside of Mr. Tim Duncan, Mr. David Robinson, Mr. Sean Elliott, Mr. Jordan. So I legitimately
He's
have
high up there for you.
one of I'm probably one of probably a handful of people that actually have a Spurs Steve Kerr jersey. So
Ooh, I've never even seen that.
yeah.
Wow. Wow, that's impressive. That's impressive.
So
Guys,
I'm interested in this episode.
well, I appreciate you jumping on. Again, I know it was a long chat, but well worth it. I'm glad we got to talk through this, and we'll be back on. Please like, share. I'm gonna try to get this out also as an audio format, so we have this in more of a podcast type. So I'll work on that over the next day or two to try to get that out there to y'all as well. Guys, be safe. Appreciate y'all. We'll be back soon.
Thanks,
Peace.
guys.